The Royals Review Pod is back with Dan, Jimmy and Rami here to discuss proceedings at Reading at the moment. And there is quite a lot to discuss, even though the defeat against Cardiff it ruins my question of is the season over, because it just absolutely is. But there is still quite a fair bit to go over. Let's start at looking at that Cardiff game then. And I'll start with you, Jim. Richardson came out post-match and said it was night and day versus the Doncaster defeat. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps a slight improvement, but ultimately we lost 3-1, and there were a lot of negatives still to unpick. But yeah, I mean, was it better than Doncaster? Yeah, probably ever so slightly. But like I said, it's totally irrelevant, really, isn't it? It's a loss at the end of the day. It's another promotion party at the SCL, all within the space of a couple of weeks. I don't think it's something to sort of sugarcoat how bad the last few weeks has been, really.
Yeah, for sure. Do you agree, Rami, or do you think it's just a case of Cardiff being much better than Doncaster, or somewhere in between?
It's hard to tell, because I feel like Reading did play better that day. I kind of mentioned it in some of the reports that Andy Rinamoto was great. Thought Daniel Chirwa did some great things that game as well. And Paddy Lane seemed to come into himself a little bit as well. Mm-hmm. But as a lot of other fans and rival fans kind of realised, it was Cardiff never really got out of second gear that whole game. It was quite an easy win for them, unfortunately. But you could see slight improvements. But was it too little, too late? You can never know. The one positive thing for me was seeing Andy Rinamoto back, and also seeing Jack Marriott back in the squad, and hearing the 1871 go wild as soon as they saw him coming onto the pitch. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy about those two things. It's kind of sad, really, though, that Jack Marriott coming back is like the thing we have to be happy about at the moment, because he's coming back to a team that's kind of finished now. Like, even if he goes and scores 20 goals in these last two games, doesn't really matter. But yeah, obviously good to have him back, and hopefully he can stay clear of injuries for the foreseeable and all of next season, because I think he'll be very important if we're to be successful next season. You mentioned Rinamoto. I think it's worth talking a little bit more about him, because been out of the side for pretty much the whole season, but come in recently and look to make a positive difference, I thought, against Cardiff. The attributes that he's sort of displaying, to me, are attributes that we've missed throughout the season, / are slightly different to what the other guys in midfield can offer. So I think it can only be a positive thing. Jim, what do you think of Rinamoto's inclusion this time out?
Yeah, great to see him. Great to see him on the pitch. I think the majority of Reading fans know what Rinamoto can bring in terms of quality and attributes, and I do think it really complements our midfield. It's definitely something that we've been missing all season, probably even the season before. I mean, Rino just doesn't stop running, really, does he? And that was the last sort of player that we had that reminds me of that is Harvey Nibbs. And I think since he's left, albeit they're in slightly different positions in midfield, but that energy has definitely been something that we've been lacking. So yeah, great to see Rino back. Be really interesting to see what happens in terms of a contract. I feel like there's a lot that he could offer to this team. I feel like we'd probably expect a departure in midfield, perhaps in the summer transfer window, perhaps with Savage leaving. Who knows? We'll have to find out. But yeah, I think Rino definitely adds value to this team. He was clearly quite excited being back at Reading. I know you caught up with him earlier on in the season. So yeah, I'm just happy that he's back on the pitch. Seems to be enjoying his football, and yeah, hopefully we can tie him down for next season as well, because there's definitely value there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd be keen to see him back next season if he's keen. What do you make on the whole Rinamoto thing, Rami? We kind of discussed that he brought something different at the weekend. Do you reckon worth bringing in next season? Do you think he'd want to stay next season? Where do you stand?
I'm kind of divided on it. I think he showed what Reading's kind of been missing in midfield for a while. Like you both kind of said, he brings something a bit different. He's somewhere between a Fraser and a Savage. Like he's between both of them. He has both their attributes. He can go forward if he needs to. He can pass it forward if he needs to. But he's really good at defending as well. So he's got both best of both worlds really there. Could play the holding midfielder, could play like further up. So yeah, and I think even I was speaking to a few fans after the Doncaster game, and they were like, he was the best player, even though he played on for like what 20 minutes or something like that. They said he was the best player on the pitch, and you can kind of see the levels like change a little bit with him in midfield, because the midfield is so central to any team really. So if I were him, I don't know how he'd feel at the moment, whether he'd want to stay if he's going to be guaranteed game time. I think there would have to be those discussions had behind the scenes to ensure that, yeah, he doesn't like lose out on his career by not getting as many games as he really can. So I'm assuming there'll be many discussions in the coming months as to how they'll deal with that situation, whether he renews or whether he finds a different club, whether in the Championship or whether in League One again, because before he came here, I know he was being touted at going to potentially Sheffield Wednesday or other clubs in the Championship that were fighting that relegation battle. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I definitely feel like it's something that Reading's missed. And he always kind of, every time I talk to a fan about him, or even people that work at the club, I think they love him so much. It's just, there's something about him, that's just his personality, his charisma, but also the way he plays football. People just love seeing him, love talking about him. So I think he'll be a good character to keep around the club for positivity, for that seniority, for being that academy graduate that, yeah, has come back, potentially didn't get the best season of his life. And I think he'd agree with that statement and want to prove something. So hopefully he stays for another year or two. But it's between him and the club now.
Yeah, of course. I think you nailed the nail on the head. That's not the right word, but there we go. He's so likable, I think. Just the way he plays, gives everything. And yeah, obviously, fans always enjoy players that came up through their academy, like he did with us. Like, always have a soft spot for players like that. And then when they come back, like, that's still there. And that's very much the case, well, particularly with how I feel about Rinomhota. I'd be very keen to see him continue at Reading, because, yeah, I think he's got a lot to offer. So, yeah, I'm just happy to see him getting game time, to be honest, because it's been quite a tough season for the bloke. So, yeah, good stuff. What's not good stuff is Reading's form at the moment. 1 win in the last 6 in the league, dying at the defeat at Stevenage. I mean, the wheels have completely fallen off, really, haven't they? But the question that I wanted to ask, and we've already discussed on whether Rinomhota will be here next season, is, despite Coe coming out and sort of backing Richardson, do you think Leam Richardson will be in charge at the start of next season, in charge of Reading, I mean? Jim?
I think that's the $1 million question, really. My head says yes, but I feel like there's still so much to prove over these next 2 games. Like the spotlight is really on Richardson, and I guess even on the players that have perhaps not performed at the heights that we would have hoped them to perform at. Yeah, I think if you're Coig and or any owner of a football club, there's not any game that you're going to just sort of forget about and say that the season's done. I think, we mentioned on the last few pods that although the playoff hopes are all but over, I mean, is it mathematically possible still? I don't think so. Oh, no, it isn't. It isn't, is it? Yeah, I mean, it's still key that we finish the season strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he probably will be in charge, but there's just a monumental task both on pitch and off pitch. I feel like, yeah, it's really not gone to plan over the last couple of weeks. But I think if we were going to see a change, we probably would have seen it over the last week or so. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree with you that I do think we'll see Liam Richardson in charge of Reading at the start of that next season, and that is largely because of when Liam Richardson joined. Coig mentioned that he'd been following Richardson for like 5 years or something, so he's obviously a fan of Richardson's. Might not be necessarily a fan of what's going on at the moment, but he obviously likes the bloke. And then to come out and kind of support him, even though not necessarily the most convincing. I don't know why they would get rid of him now with two sort of dead rubbers to play. And throughout the whole season, Richardson's spoken about how important it is that he gets his own players in, that he gets a transfer window. And although he did have January, and jury's still out as to whether or not he performed well in that. I think they will give him the summer, and then I don't know if things don't change, it will probably be another Noel Hunt situation. I imagine where 10 games in they'll make a call. Fingers crossed. By that point, we're at the top of the league with 10 wins out of 10, but we'll see. What do you make of it all, Rami?
That is another $1 million question. It's a really hard one to kind of decipher in terms of whether he'll be here over the summer, whether he'll start the season. And like kind of Jim said, the next 2 games are very important because I think it would be very difficult for the owners to back, and I'm not speaking for them, the owners to back a manager that's lost 5 games in a row. So if he loses the next 2 games, the cards are kind of stacked against Liam Richardson. But if he kind of pulls a result of Rotherham, who have already been relegated, so there's no kind of stakes there, and there's 6 points to play for. Then now it's just playing for how far up the table you finish underneath the playoffs. Mm-hmm. It's a chance for them to show some new tactics, potentially give some of the academy players a try to give them some game time, a few minutes here and there. But it is hard to tell at the moment what the future lies for Liam Richardson and the backroom staff. Like you both mentioned, Rob Coog's backed him publicly. But I also recall a time when he backed Noel Hunt publicly, and then a week later he turned around and said, sorry, mate. Yeah. Mutual agreement to part ways. So it's a difficult one, and I feel like the ownership group see this as very much as a results-based business. And if the results aren't stacking up and they don't see change, then they're not scared to make difficult decisions, even if they've already publicly backed you. So it will be an interesting summer, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel quite excited about the summer. I know I don't really have much to kind of like that's making me feel excited, but just I always get this at the end of a season where we've been disappointing, where there's like renewed hope. And now that we've had a season away from the old regime of doom and gloom, I feel like maybe we can start to do something, but we'll see. Right. Last question then before we touch on the ones fired in on social. And I'm sure you have an opinion on this, Rami, but I'll start with Jim. What on earth is going on behind the scenes at Reading at the moment? It just seems like there's constant controversy is not even the right word, but just I don't know. Something is going on and I don't really understand it. Can you make it any clearer, Jim?
No, I mean, I think we had this question last week and the week before. Yeah, I just think there's obviously been, a big disconnect between the fans, the manager, and then that sort of trickled down through the players with the leak of a player saying that they're not happy. So yeah, I think, and then amongst all of that, missing out on the playoffs and throwing away the easy matches or easier matches, and just nothing's gone right for Reading over the last 3 weeks or so, has it? And I feel like it's just at boiling point now, really. Or to be honest, it's probably past boiling point. I think everyone's just sort of checked out really from the season. There's not much to play for. Like I said, it would just be good to see us finish strong. But in terms of what's going on, I have absolutely no idea. I don't think anyone has any idea.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't. But Rami, you are probably the most likely out of the three of us to have anything to share. Anything that you can add?
Well, I want to start off first by saying that, yeah, obviously I broke the story with the leak in the dressing room, and I know that it's a tough story, and it was a tough story to write, but we at the Reading Chronicle worked a lot behind the scenes to make sure that we followed all the legal procedures and all the protocols to make sure that was factually accurate, and just gave enough time to the club to respond and make sure that the player was kept anonymous, not due to cowardice or anything like that, but it's in the journalist code to keep your sources anonymous, to make sure that there's no repercussions for anything specific, because obviously if you break rank, you could lose your job, you could be ostracized or anything like that, and we wanted to make sure that nothing like that was able to come out with this. And we also felt like at the time it's a story that the fans needed to hear and then kind of see what was happening behind the scenes, because I think otherwise it would have just been speculation. There was speculation after the Doncaster Rovers kind of game that there was a bust up in the dressing room, and Lewis Wing was slagging off fans on a train. Derek Williams went home on a train, all of this stuff, and that something was going on behind the scenes. So it felt like the right time to release that story and make sure to get some facts straight in that regard. So yeah, it's an interesting one, because I feel like that story kind of opened up a whole can of worms that nobody kind of expected. And to be fair to the club, they've kept a united front ever since, and they've all said, well, Lewis Wing came out to say that they dealt with the matter privately, and that the players had a meeting, they all discussed it and discussed any unhappiness or anything like that, but they've dealt with it privately, and they wouldn't tell the media what that discussion was or what the result of it became. You had Leam Richardson obviously saying that he doesn't believe that the story is true, that he said it's fabricated social media and there's no unhappiness, and so did Paulie O'Connor after the match on Saturday. I'm happy to put it on the record that Richardson has refused to talk to me on 2 occasions now. He ignored me the first time on the Thursday after the post-match pre-match conference, and then he flat out ignored me again on Saturday after the post-match conference. He doesn't want to take any questions from me, which we kind of expected. Like, after such a story breaks out, it's a difficult one to kind of contend with, but at the same time we felt like, again, it was the right thing to do, and the story needed to go out there. So in terms of what else is going on behind the scenes at the moment, we're not really too sure. I think there's loads of discussions happening, and something seems to be happening. It's not just the fans that feel that way. A lot of the media personnel feel that way, that there has been discussions. And the fact that Rob Couhig put out that letter so soon after that article came out, when it was supposed to be an end of the season letter, but it would kind of force his hand, because a lot of people were calling for Leam Richardson to be sacked. Which, again, I'll put on the record, the Reading Chronicle did not call for him to be sacked. It was the fans. It was a fan's opinion. Just make sure that's out there. So he put out that open letter to back him, and also give some reassurance to the fans as well as to what was going on and how they're going to build over the summer and how they're going to do a top-down review. So clearly Rob's looking at the situation and going, okay, we need to actually look at the bigger picture here and actually review what happened this season, what we could do better, what needs to be dealt with, all of this sort of thing. And I feel like this was a learning, from my perspective, it was a learning season for Rob and the ownership group. It's their first time it's their first year with Reading, and obviously with a club the size of Reading, they've been used to dealing with Wycombe. And as much as Wycombe is a great League One club, it doesn't have the history, it doesn't have what Reading has, the size of the fan base, any of that, and it's a different beast to deal with. So it is a learning curve for them, and I think that's the best way to approach it. And also anything that has been coming out from again, I'm not using this to be the Reading Chronicles voice, but anything that has been put out, it's nothing personal against the management group or anything like that, because since he has come in, there is no denying that the results have increased. He's got the points. we were fighting for the playoffs. There's no denying that. I feel like he's done a good job with what he's had. But when you lose the fan base and the post-match interviews and everything that goes on, some stories need to be told, and that's what we did. So,
yeah, nice. Thanks for the update. I think obviously it's not great to hear that things aren't good behind the scenes, but I think it's good to know, like, we've come out of a period where we knew pretty much nothing about our club when it was going through the worst times ever. So the fact that we get a bit of insight, and the fact that Rob's coming out with relatively regular updates, I think it's positive movements for the club generally. I just wish it wasn't reports on disrest or people being annoyed and upset, but maybe next season is the season where it'll all be much more rosy and positive, and you'll be reporting on fun things. Right, a few questions then from the guys on X. First one, I mean, the answer is very easy, but I don't know if you've got anything better than a yes or no here, Jim. Do Reading need more pace? Do we need more pace on the wings? I'm assuming they mean generally, but yeah.
I think so. And I think, I mean, going off of what Richardson explained when he first signed, first joined Reading in the interview, and the way that he wants to play, I think pacey wingers, pacey fullbacks is exactly what he needs for that system to work. Do we have that? To an extent. Can it be improved? 100%. I don't think the fullbacks are particularly pacey. I mean, it's really hard to say unless you actually have the their stats and figures in front of you. But from what you see, you wouldn't really consider any of them as like rapid players. Similar with the wingers. I mean, I think Kyrie were potentially our quickest winger, maybe, and he's also quite quite technical, quite tricky. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got. And I know this is what Leam Richardson said as well. We've got the foundations of a good squad, but there just needs to be that injection of what's missing. And yeah, I think pace is definitely that as well. Even in the midfield, I mean, I would consider Rinomota a relatively pacey midfielder, and I think you can see that straight off the bat. That attribute was definitely missing, and that's something that he brought in that last game. So yeah. To answer the question in one word, yes, I do.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent this whole podcast agreeing with you, which I don't enjoy, but I do agree again. And I think, touching on your point there, you see how successful Kyrie has been since he came in, taking players on, running at defenders. It's great. But unfortunately, he's the only one really doing that. If we had that from both sides, I think we'd be much more successful. I also think it would make I'm hoping we don't play this style next season, but we might do. It would make our long ball style more successful if we had players that could receive the ball, keep it, take players on, and stop like a constant barrage on our defence. So, yeah, I'm all for more pace. It's no secret that I'm a massive Lewis Wing fan, and I think he could benefit from more pace in the midfield, because it's one of his downfalls, I think, that he's not the quickest. So yeah, I think more pace everywhere would be welcome. That said, you don't want to lose quality for pace, but if you could get quality pace, then yeah, absolutely. Rami, I'll give you the final question so we can wrap up. We've already covered it off really. But do you think the next two games have an impact on the likelihood of Richardson being Reading manager next season, or do you think the decision's been made?
I feel like you never know with Rob. Prime example is the one I mentioned with the Noel Hunt situation, where he backed him publicly, and then a week later he was like, "It's not working out." So I think it depends on the next two results, and not only that, but also the reaction from the fans, and if Liam can get them back on board, because he has unfortunately lost quite a sizable amount of the fans here. I did hear some boos on Saturday, and I don't think I'm the only one that heard them. And there was lots of fans saying that they're not going to clap him and stuff like that, and they're getting quite annoyed with his post-match interviews. So I think if those issues are addressed and are something that can be resolved, and he can yeah, the club can take a look at that and go, okay, how do we deal with this better? How do we do this moving forward? How do we create a connection between the club and the fans again, or not even the club and the fans, but the manager and the fans? Because I feel like the fans don't have anything against the players necessarily, but it's mainly against the manager and some of his comments. So I feel like if that's dealt with, then maybe there is a chance to reconcile. But it also depends on those results. And I feel like if it's, again, 2 losses, it makes his case much more difficult because the fans will just jump on that completely. So, yeah, I think the next 2 games are quite important, not for Reading's season, but for Leam Richardson's season at Reading.
Nice. Cool. All right. I think that brings us to a close then for today. As Rami mentioned, 2 more games left of the season. Not much to play for Reading, but would be very nice to end the season on a high after a period of negativity. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. Thanks, Jimmy and Rami too. We'll be back, I'm sure, after the Rotherham game to chat through all things Reading. But until then, enjoy it and come on, you all.